He's vice president of the NGO Transient Workers Count 2 or TWC2. He's a compelling and controversial social and political commentator who blogs mainly in his blog or his site called Yawning Bread, which he founded in 1996. He's gay and an activist who describes himself as, quote, cause-driven culture critic with liberal tendencies. Alex Au, welcome to Inconvening Questions.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So, you obviously have a tendency to create controversy, whether you're doing it intentionally or otherwise. I would say you're conspired to be controversial. You're a political critic. You're a champion of foreign worker causes. You've been a long-standing champion of gay rights and equality movement. You are a compelling writer in English. I don't know whether you write in any other language, but your facility for the language has actually, over the years, become a poison dart, or at least been viewed as a poison dart. So you're really living on the edge, aren't you? What are you about, Alex Au? What are you about, and what drives you?
Let's start with the word controversy and controversial. I think it's very easy for people and for society to slip into complacency. I mean, we all get very comfortable with our own surroundings, with our own habits and our own place. And as a result, I think people don't devote enough time to exploring something different, a different idea, a different cuisine, for example, a different way of perhaps conceiving of the world. I think it's important that, and I think it's exciting and certainly going to be very interesting for all of us if we somehow gave ourselves a bit of opportunity to just look at a different side of things. And certainly for me, it's something that I like to do. And if I provoke somebody, some reaction from somebody, I kind of enjoy it. But I think I add to what's of value out there if sometimes I, push people to think a little differently or see something a little differently.
So let me try and understand you better. Is everything that you're doing, is it because that's the way you are? You just want to try out different things and you want to try and push the buttons, get people to think deeper? Or is it because you really believe in those causes?
Oh, I certainly believe in them. But I suppose I've not quite grown up in the sense that I just, like to push some buttons here and there. It's like a kid, who kind of like pushes you to with some request that you didn't anticipate.
So a Chocho King.
I'm sorry?
A Chocho King, is it?
Oh, is that a, oh, I'm sorry, I really don't understand that
You don't
expression.
know. You are definitely an Anglophile, my friend. You don't know what Chocho King is. Okay, doesn't matter. But what you're saying resonates with something you have sort of blogged about. This is a quote from you, Alex. The world would be ugly if everything has to be black and white. There's something poignantly beautiful about the shimmering shades of gray.
Exactly. Right? I mean, there's of course some value to just say a black and white etch drawing, but I think gray is nice. Full color is even nicer. So
yes, it's interesting, but is there a tinge of mischief in this, or are you doing all this playfully? What is it? I'm still trying to understand.
What is wrong with play? You see, sometimes play takes you places that you didn't think you would go. How many of us just travel just for the heck of it, just for the fun of it, just a chance to look at something? How many of us do things with a recipe? Let's just tweak the recipe in some way, and then you discover something new. What's wrong with it? It's good. What's wrong with it?
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just trying to understand, perhaps, why you have been, over the years, you've come to be seen something like the enemy of the state by quite a few people in establishment. Right? It could be precisely because of what you're describing, because for you it is play, but for people in government it's serious work because they are doing something very seriously. They're putting in a lot of effort to deal with these issues, to think through these issues, whether they're about 377A or whether they're about foreign worker dormitory rights, COVID, and then comes Alex Au, who's throwing darts because for him this is play. You see what I'm saying?
But let's move beyond the wordplay a little bit here.
All right.
Just because the government is working very hard and thinking about the issues doesn't make them right. You can still work very hard at a wrong solution. And I'm reminded of something from my 377A days when I was primarily a gay activist. I kept on hearing this trope from the other side, where you usually it'll be a woman who says, who's married to a gay man. And in those days, it was very common for gay men to still get married just for the sake of social form.
Get married to someone of the other sex, the other gender. All right.
Yes. And the woman would say, I love him so much, I can make him straight because of my love for him.
Okay.
That never worked. So we must be very careful not to confuse hard work with being right. You can be very earnest about it. You can work very hard about it. You can think very hard about it. But quite often, that does not always give you the right solutions or the best solutions. And I think we know that listening to alternatives, being open to ideas that might not have struck you, but might have struck somebody else, and incorporating that alternative point of view, even if you call it dissent, I think would make a better outcome than just working very, very hard at what you want to work at. So we have to be very careful about that.
That's a very interesting point you've raised, right? Now, what you're saying is just because you work hard and you're earnest about it doesn't mean that you've got it right. And I don't think you're saying that necessarily in a disparaging manner. It can happen to any one of us, right?
Exactly. It's a systemic problem here.
It's a systemic problem, and also the human tendency to be righteous.
Yes, absolutely.
There is the human tendency to be righteous.
So what I'm most concerned with is this very ivory tower kind of approach that Singapore tends to slip into. We don't prize. We only pay lip service to consultation, to being participatory or consultative, but we don't actually live it. And that's because perhaps maybe it's an Asian thing. We are too concerned with face. We're too concerned with our status in society and how it's very difficult, therefore, to accommodate the comments of the maid in the household, who may actually have a better idea of how to do something, to cook.
From my experience, that happens very often.
Yeah. So so as a society, I think we must be very careful with it, because historically, what tends to happen is that social gaps, income gaps tend to widen. If you leave things alone, they tend to widen. People with power accumulate more power. People who are relatively powerless become more powerless. And it takes effort sometimes, all right, to constantly work against these natural tendencies in order to keep society in balance.
But the government has been saying, and I think they are not altogether not serious about it, they have been saying that, for the past few years in particular, right, especially with the Singapore conversation and so on, that they want to listen to different views. They want to listen to contra views. I do believe that they're sincere about it. But do you think it's working? Do you think the antenna is up, that they're really listening or just hearing?
I think there are two problems. The first is that they tend to, they may not realize it, but they tend to want to hear different ways of achieving the same objectives. They're not really prepared to listen to a critique of the objectives. And that is very important, because then it becomes very, very, what that so-called consultation is becomes very limiting. It becomes a matter of technique rather than goals.
So just to clarify, so what you're saying is the government or the establishment appears to be more receptive to consultation downstream.
Exactly.
But not upstream, where you deal with goals, purpose, objectives.
That's right.
Okay.
I think Singapore is actually relatively weak about that. We seem to have designed ourselves as a kind of a corporate entity where the objectives are considered to be unassailable or known or not to be questioned. And yes, we can work with everybody else when it comes to how we're going to implement or execute or get there. It seems to be an accepted fact that we need to have migrant workers and they need to be cheap. Otherwise, our economy cannot survive without cheap labor. And once you have that as a frame, then it becomes very difficult to talk about the rights of migrant workers or so forth. Then the idea that they must be transient, that they must come and then they must go, that it seems to be incontestable. But we are saying, for example, that we should explore the possibility that we should bring them in pretty early in life, say as early 20s. They should be trained here, and we shouldn't be training hoping that migrant workers would come trained from abroad, and then they start work from day one. We should be able to examine all these completely different ways. But that brings me to my second point, that, and I've heard it from somebody from none other than Channel News Asia, Singapore does seem to lack imagination. We don't seem to want to let our imagination fly, which means that it's very hard for us to contemplate a different kind of Singapore. We seem to feel very insecure once we step onto this road where we say, what do you think Singapore could look like? For example, what if we really did legalize gay marriage? What happens? What sort of society would we be? It seems to be a kind of a no-go area. What happens if we are not a Chinese majority society? That's another no-go area. We just cannot contemplate it. So we seem to be very limiting in what we consider consultation, participation, and so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting, and thanks for the examples and illustration. What if what you're saying is true? What do you think has caused us to become this?
Because I think one of the constant tropes throughout Singapore's history is that we are a small little place. We're always going to be very insecure. We have big threats, and survival is the key. The problem with that narrative, the problem with that principle is that once you so privilege and prioritize survival, then you don't have a lot of room for play, for exploration of other possibilities, or for addressing other issues which are perhaps seen as not important for survival.
So a hangover from the 1960s, 70s, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's legacy, because this concept of a siege, that we're under siege.
Exactly.
Right? And perhaps at that point in time, it was necessary to get everybody together, and focus on how we can actually stand shoulder to shoulder against the threats. And there were some threats at that point in time. But what you're saying is that over the years, we should actually shelve that sort of thinking. Otherwise, we're going to be caught in this warp.
True. You see, we keep on saying we are small, but we are not. We have the same population as New Zealand. Okay, you might say that New Zealand has no neighbors nearby that could present a near threat. But consider Finland. That's Russia next door. Russia is a very big country, huge population, and Finland has a population that's Singapore's size. And yet, Finland is a very different kind of place, without being so conscious all the time of its risks, and can still be a comfortable, liberal, democratic society next door to a big country. So why not?
So very quickly, let me ask you this, right? What has sort of drawn you to enter the arena and fight for these highly controversial sort of causes, right? The gay cause, it's a long haul, right? It's a difficult, frustrating fight, a battle, and you have not let up. The foreign worker cause is also difficult because there are different philosophical positions that people can adopt, right? Like what you said, do we want to see them as transient, or do we want to include them as part of our community, right? The Lien Center for Social Innovation, in one of their papers on unmet social needs, actually talked about them being one of the communities in Singapore that's under threat, right? This was some time back. So my question to you is, what has drawn you to actually fight these causes? Because surely there is collateral damage.
Well, with the gay issue, it's just personal, all right?
Right.
And I think a lot of people get into these front lines just because they are personally impacted by it. I mean, look what's happening at the Black Lives Matter movement in America, right? People who would not normally be on the front lines are suddenly on the front lines because it's personal to them. So for the gay matter, it's personal to me. It's very different from the foreign worker issue. I am not a foreign worker. If anything, because I'm a male, I'm Chinese, I'm a citizen, I'm actually in a very privileged position in this society.
And you are in the
privilege.
You are in
Right?
you are in the higher socio-economic class.
Yeah, I speak English, for example, which is an advantage in English, in Singapore. So I approach the foreign worker issue in a very different way. And I usually tell people, which is a bit of a surprise to most of them, that I'm there actually to learn. And I think it's been a huge learning experience to be immersed in the foreign worker issue, because in that area, I'm working with people who are among the most disadvantaged of Singapore. And by working alongside them and with them, I actually see how they see the world through their eyes, experience through them what Singapore really feels like. There's good and there's bad. They do like working in Singapore. They do think very highly of Singapore. And the most outrageous thing is that they suffer, to me, what seems like terrible exploitation and abuses. And for them, they think that, well, that's my lot in life. So, you know.
And it's not just learning, right? You're learning, and as you're learning, you are seeing things that need to be fixed, and you are working on it. So my final question, because we have run out of time actually, is this. Now, your modus operandi, right? You write about it, you work with the NGO, and you appear to be on the other side. Why don't you try and work with the government? Have you tried to work with the government on whether it's a foreign worker issue or whether it's a gay rights issue, on really trying to be on the same side and trying to sort it out? Have you tried that?
Vishwa, it takes two hands to clap. And I think if anybody wants to talk to me, like yourself, I will always talk. All right? I'll always be ready to conduct a conversation and a dialogue. But I think which is what I said at the beginning, right? There is a sense from the other side that we're not talking about techniques of achieving the same objectives, that I often talk about a different world, a different imagination, a different kind of Singapore. And I don't think it is quite on their agenda to talk to me about those things.
At this point in time, perhaps.
At this point in time.
Thank you very much, Alex. All the best.